company, McDonald's. If we read the press, we get sort of a singular view of what is going on there. Mats is one of the insiders of McDonald's, first from his work in Sweden, and now for the last several years is his work right at the center of strategy for McDonald's and in their new venture area. Please welcome Mats Lederhausen.
Thank you, Patrick. Do I have 5 minutes, or what do I have? You have 3 minutes. Thank God I was trained in fast food. Speed is good. Sometimes it's good. Good. It's great to be here. That was a fascinating presentation, and it was fascinating along several dimensions to me. And I can't help but think why this happened. It's either the brilliance and wonderful magic of Patrick and his team knowing me, knowing Josephine, and trying to make this kind of work. That's the answer. It's synchronicity or fate or whatever, I don't know. Or it's European homogeneity, because Josephine and I are both European. But I have never, and I speak a lot, I have never followed somebody that said almost exactly what I was about to say in totally different industries. So I can make this really short and say, I rest my case. Bravo, Josephine, and now I sit down and we'll have a chat. But I also learned that repetition is the mother of knowledge, and important stuff is worth saying in many ways. So I'm going to give my little talk about purpose, which I've come to speak about. But it's basically the same thing. I also am a little bit intimidated speaking to you about thoughts on design. It reminds me when I try to speak about sex with my teenage children. It's a hot topic, but I'm not sure I'm bringing anything new. So, I have always been, I don't know why, but I've always been a humble servant in the vineyard of transition. I don't know why. I want my soul to be more occupied by my dreams than by memory. I like being in the middle. I respect the past. I have a lot of affinity and love for the past, but I'm more interested in the future. But I love sort of kind of identifying what we need to do differently, and then with a group of people that I like working with, trying to get there. I don't like just thinking about it. I like doing it, like actively trying to build the stuff that's going to take us there. And I think design, it's one of these words now that's become very popular, and everybody fills it with different meaning. But to me, design is not different than leadership. It's actually one of the same thing. And to me, ultimately, design and leadership is about identifying the potential purpose hidden in the chaos of the moment. And that could bring to birth new possibilities for a person, a company, or a nation. And ultimately, design and leadership is about seeing what life could be like while dealing with life as it is. And that, as we all know, doing this is really, really difficult. So I thought about bringing up 3 things. One is a little context. I think perspective is really important, so you know where I'm coming from, how I see the world, and which lens I'm looking at the world through. Just a few lessons as a change guy. I've dealt with change all my life. Was the chief strategy guy at McDonald's for 5 years, the last 5 years, and now I have a different change job. Always dealt with change. I thought I'd share with you some of my scars trying to do change. And then end on a higher note and on purpose in general. So what's going on before prescription, even at the doctor's office or here? It's good with some description. So it's very clear to me that we're going through a very slow but pretty profound transformation, as Josephine was talking about. And I think from any standpoint, it is clear that we are at the end of many things. We're at the end of the industrial age, for sure. We're at the end of America's population and culture being primarily drawn from Europe. We're at the end of the Atlantic-based economic and military power. We're at the end of the nation state as the outer limit of a person's identity, and I think that's very profound. We're certainly at the end of the masculine hierarchical era, and we're probably at the end of the Christian age, and we're probably at the end of traditional warfare, and we're at the end of many, many things. But of course, we're also at the beginning of equal many things. And Winston Churchill many years put this kind of type of change very brilliantly when he said, we're shaping the world faster than we can change ourselves, and we are applying to the present the habits of the past, which is very frustrating. And that's what we're living through. The good news is that we've been through it before. The problem is we haven't. You know? And I've learned, one of the lessons I have learned as a change guy is that it takes certain muscle. It's like working out. I mean, you've got to have been there and done that. And we haven't been through this. Our forefathers have, but, you know, they're dead. And I don't think they passed it on genetically. One of my favorite examples is that the last time we went through a similar shift was when we left the agricultural society and went into the industrial society. In my home country where I grew up, Sweden, 25% of the population emigrated right here. A few blocks from here, Andersonville, and Minnesota. That's why you have so many Swedish people here in America. Speaking very funny. That's what happened. 25%. You know, I kid my Swedish relatives saying part of Sweden's problem is that most of their entrepreneurial talent left. So their entrepreneurial genetic pool was diminished forever, which I think is a problem. But that's a different topic. Now, the picture I have looked at, the big picture I have had in my mind, the image I've had in my mind about this transformation for a decade or so is this. I think we are living through and witnessing and experiencing the end of the hunting season in human existence. Why? Because for thousands of years, the sources of strength, wealth, and power could be hunted for. They were dependent on land, borders, and material and stuff you could touch. Today, or for the last decades, what has produced wealth, strength, power, success is no longer dependent on land, borders, and stuff you can touch. It is dependent on us. Our intellect, our emotions, our creativity, our lust, our energy, our passion. And that is a profound change. And you know the dimensions of change. I don't have to go through them, but there are many. And there are many broad implications of this type of change. The challenge for us as designers, change guys, leaders, call it whatever you want, is profound. You know, I think leadership today is primarily something that I think best can be described as social architecture. You need to build an environment that attracts the best people and helps them and enables those people work most effectively and efficiently and passionately and energetically and creatively together. That's a big challenge that I wasn't trained to do and most leaders wasn't trained to do. Anthropology. You know, Josephine talked about the importance of asking the right questions and being observers. And very different challenge for most of us. Leaders as creators. The end of, you know, we can't just produce more stuff. We got to do different stuff and services and products. And that's equally true. We weren't trained for that. And then this global thing. I'll come back to that in a minute. And, you know, just some evidence. Again, I don't need to go through this. It's pretty obvious, I think, for this audience. But, you know, my favorite example is accounting. Accounting, and I don't want to pick on accountants. They're needed. They're good people. Probably not too many of them in this room, so it's probably safe. Which is interesting, right? I mean, I've been a senior executive in many companies for 15 years. I have never had an interview with an accountant asking me about brand equity or customer loyalty or how I feel as a key talent of this organization. And yet, everybody would agree that brand equity and loyalty and talent, happiness, are much more important measures and metrics of a health of a company than the average lifetime of a fax machine, which is what we still measure in accounting as approximations of health. And Josephine again touched on the GDP metric is another example. Education. Go to the places where we educate tomorrow's leaders. How much anthropology, how much psychiatry, how much human insight-driven faculties and sciences are we educating tomorrow's leaders? Not enough, I would say. It's changing slowly, but not enough. Just a few things about McDonald's. I normally don't speak a lot about McDonald's because it's kind of obvious, but just a few thoughts that may be interesting. Larry Keeley actually made this slide for me once. We were speaking at a conference, and I think it's a pretty fun slide because it is a phenomenal story. 50 years old, we did pretty well, you know. It's an interesting graph. But of course, as all success, it's both a plus and a minus. It's a prison, in a sense, because, you know, you get so successful and you actually think that you knew something. And that's very, very dangerous, as we all know. Gary Hamel produced this slide a couple of years ago at another conference, which I think is a very good way of talking about or understanding why change is so difficult. It's about our inability to escape the past, and it's about our inability to invent the future. And there are lots of reasons, lots of good reasons for why this is so difficult in companies. You know, you could more sloppily call this fat and happy, which was certainly true for us. We became ignorant, and then arrogant, and then sooner or later irrelevant. That's kind of what happens to established institutions. The good news was that we had some great people. We're in a great business because, regardless of what you think, I've studied a lot of future stuff. There's no evidence that people are going to stop to eat. There's less evidence that people are going to spend 21 meals a week preparing the whole meals themselves from scratch. I hope there is a return to doing more of it from scratch, but not 21 meals a week. We have financial strength, and we had a healthy dose of revenge. Not an unimportant thing when you're going to, you know, pissing people off is a good motivation. And we wanted to prove to the world, after having beaten up for a few years, that we weren't dead. We were simply resting. The key ingredients in our change plan were around the following things. Very obvious to you. Customer centricity, from selling what we can make to making what we can sell. That sounds like trivial, but it still is a huge challenge for an operational-driven company like McDonald's. We thought we were producing what customers actually wanted, and in a sense we were, but you know, the production machine was more important than actually making sure that we were. Change of growth strategy, huge issue. We had confused size and success. So from adding stores to customers to stores, huge shift in strategy. You know, being better, not bigger, is now the mantra. Concentration, we did way too many things. And it's one of my most powerful lessons for myself in the last few years have been to witness the power of doing fewer things better. Measurement. If you're going to change a lot of stuff, you better change what you measure. You better change compensation systems. You better change, you know, what you measure, because what doesn't get counted doesn't count, as we know. Resource alignment. If you need to put your money where your mouth is. If you're going to change if you say you're going to change stuff, you better reallocate the dollars and reallocate the talent. Put your most talented, visible, iconic, great leaders on the most important priorities. And put the biggest dollars on those priorities. So in our case, we took away $1 billion basically from new stores and put it in existing stores and revamped those in different ways. And then discipline, stay the course. And the good news is, you know, it has worked. We put a plan to win together which had all these metrics. Don't need to bore you with that. And, you know, we've done pretty well in the last few years. In fact, so well that when the first picture from Mars came, it looked like this. And we didn't have anything to do with this. So, a few thoughts about, you know, what lessons I have learned being a change guy. And, you know, Machiavelli was right when he stated many, many years ago, he said, "It should be borne in mind that there is nothing more difficult to handle, more doubtful of success, and more dangerous to implement than initiating change. Innovation makes enemies of all those who prospered under the old regime and only lukewarm support is forthcoming from those who would prosper under the new. And all of you here are involved and probably, like me, fired up and excited about doing things differently. But it is a very difficult task. You know, I was the chief strategy guy at McDonald's. I thought of myself as the chief psychiatry guy, dealing with middle-aged men's fear of change, mainly. A lot of, psychiatry involved. And a lot of consulting. I mean, you give a lot of advice. But the actual interpretation of that role, if you're the head designer or whatever, is really the chief insulting officer. You know, Josephine had a different title, but, it's the same thing. And you've got to be ready for it. So I've acquired a lot of scars, and I thought I'd share some of them quickly with you. I just put down 9, and I'll just run through them very quickly. The first learning is that who is much more important than what. We are not in the hamburger business serving people. We are in the people business serving hamburgers. If you are going to have change, you better make sure that the manifestation of that change, if you're going to design something new, the people put in charge of implementing that new, design needs to be part of him or her. When people make people choices, when companies make people choices, I'm astounded that they don't realize that they also make a strategy choice. You can't make a people choice and a leadership selection without strategy selection. Can't bifurcate the two. They come embedded in each person is a strategy. They can change, but sometimes that's very difficult. And you better put the right people against the right resources. Jim Collins has recently taught us that putting the right people on the bus comes actually before deciding where to drive the bus, which I agree with. So people comes first. The customer is the boss. When we changed CEO at McDonald's, we did a clever thing because people thought that we changed. Yeah, sorry, I shouldn't do that now. When we changed CEO at McDonald's, we did a clever thing. We said we don't have a new CEO, but customer is our CEO. Try to make a big think of that. It's really interesting. This was in the GE annual report a few years ago. Bureaucracies love to focus inward. It is not that they dislike customers. They just don't find them as interesting as themselves. And we laugh. But you know what? We're all like that. Don't kid yourself. We say, oh, customers are really important. But, we think we are much more important. And it's hard work to really be customer-centric. It's really, really hard work, but important. This is something I'm so proud of. I created in an earlier innovation job I had that I trademarked it, so you can't steal it. But I think it's really important. Most large companies have to work on things that can have major impact, big ideas. And I think most large companies in general are good at that. We don't work on a lot of small stuff. Sometimes we do, but I think it's really important, obviously, because you can't waste your time on things that can't have a massive impact. Now, most big companies start big. They think that the idea has to be prepared for fitting in their entire system immediately. So they structure it with legal agreements and safety nets, and it becomes $1 million project. Anything a big company has 6 figures easily attached to it. And if you do that, the head of innovation, in that case me, gets fired very quickly. Because your batting average early on in new ideas is really poor. And your first prototypes really suck. And they should suck, because the first prototype is intended not to be perfect. It's intended for us to react to so we can make it better. So start small, really important. And then scale or fail fast. Try it, fail it, or scale it very quickly. And at McDonald's, we're very good, actually, at the ends of this. We weren't so good in the middle. We're getting better at it. 80-20, fascinating concept, the 80-20 rule. I try to work on this. This is one of my big personal priorities, to work on this better, to make sure that I think about relationships, 80-20 relationships all the time, because in any statistical population, almost any, there are 80-20 relationships. 20% of our customers account for 80% of our profits. 20% of problems over here account for 20% of stuff accounts for 80% of problems. There are these kinds of relationships all the time. And concentration and focus is so critical, because we don't have endless priority resources. We don't have endless time. This is a really important one, particularly in marriage and in fatherhood, in human relationships in general, it's one of the finest, best principles that I try to practice as often as I can. But also when doing innovation, it's really important. Because there are always skeptics, and as Rosabeth Moss-Kanter once so accurately put it, roads curve, momentum slows, critics emerge. That's the pattern of new design. And if you have to underpromise and overdeliver, you have to sandbag like hell, if that's what it takes. That's okay too. But make sure you keep doing what you're doing and keep over-delivering all the time to keep and protect the momentum of the new idea and close out all the skeptics and critics. Portfolio approach, this is pretty obvious, but I just thought I'd share what I've learned about the characteristics of a portfolio of new ideas and new designs, new innovations. I think there are 4 important qualities, characteristics of a pipeline, a healthy pipeline. One is quantity. You need to balance focus with percentage. So you got to have enough so the ones that fail don't kill you or run dry, may help you run dry, or at the same time you need to have few enough so you can handle it, the focus point. The quality, balance excitement with certainty, that's a really tough one. Some ideas, people just get very excited about. They may not be very probable. Make sure that you have some boring ones that really will make it. Maturity mix, sequencing is key, so all of them don't happen at once. And then strategic coverage, both in terms of are you covering your most important strategic priorities, but also are you prepared for, as a company, if this works, what it makes you as a company. Remember, Christopher Columbus did not set out to discover America. This is my most important one, at least as it relates to McDonald's. McDonald's is an incredibly decentralized company. Most people don't know that. Most people don't think about that. The story of McDonald's is mainly about loose and tight, about federalism, about the principle of subsidiarity. And on the days I'm frustrated when I've spent too much time deluding myself that I can somehow control the McDonald's system, I try to lie down until that feeling goes away. And thanks to our forefathers, we inherited a culture that deep down appreciates the beautiful quality of self-organized systems. And over the years to come, my hope and dream is that McDonald's will be recognized as a truly intelligent network, not unlike the internet or not unlike Apache web servers or maybe even a coral reef, because it's really what it's all about. And I think companies get in huge trouble when they centralize innovation. I've found that the best thing to do, at least in McDonald's, is to get the smartest ideas as far away from headquarters as possible, because they work better there and they're better protected. And once they work close to the restaurants, they scale much quicker too. Optimism is important, really important. Do you know what this is? This is roughly the average scientific measured impact of placebo. If it works physiologically, if we can get healthier just believing we are about to get healthier, it has to work in design and innovation. And some people are so cynical, they even doubt the sincerity of other cynics. Have you also found that out? The world is full of skeptics and cynics, and it's really hurting. Just an eyebrow from the wrong person in the wrong room can kill a new idea. And it's very, very fragile. And I've always believed that if you believe more than you can more than you believe. So you have to believe. You have to be a preacher. You have to really believe in the new stuff you're trying to bring. And then finally, perhaps the most obvious point is about execution. Design without execution is as hopeless as execution without design. Paths are made by walking, not by talking. We know that. You can't talk yourself out of a problem you behaved yourself into. I have always believed that 50%